بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيدنا وحبيب قلوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا المحمود الأحمد أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Brothers and sisters, another episode of Alwasi TV, and I am joined today with Brother Basim AlAnsari, who is one of our revered members of the community. It's lovely to have you here today.
Thank you very much.
This is, I think, is going to be a one-of-a-kind kind of a discussion. First time we're trying this at Alwasi TV, where we're going to be having a chat as a duo discussion rather than a Q&A and fire the questions away type discussion. So I think we've got a few topics lined up for today. And I think the first topic is very close to both of our hearts in our community, and is to explore the idea of poetry in general terms, and then a little bit of discussions about eulogy and eulogy of Ahlulbayt alayhim salam, in particular using the English language as a cornerstone for the basis of our poetry. And we can explore some other ideas. So please let us know what your thoughts are regarding this topic, Brother Basim.
So, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Salaam alaikum to yourself, Brother Karrar, also to all the listeners and audience. Inshallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us the honor and, to be honest, the pride as well. Because yes, we're not proud in the arrogant sense, but we're proud that we are amongst the servants of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And mashallah, of course, you are an example in our community that's, I think, a very good role model for our youth in your khidmah, despite, mashallah, your achievements in professional life and in personal life.
Thank you.
So coming back to the service of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, I think it's very important. Poetry is one part of the service, and I think with poetry, Ahlulbayt salamullahi alayhim have encouraged it because it's a communication tool, because it doesn't only communicate internally but also communicates our messages externally. I have seen even some of my friends who are not followers of Ahlulbayt, for example, are very well familiar with a lot of latmiyat, and a lot of poetry in our language. Actually, some of the very well-known poets and some of the very well-known poetry in the history of the Shia, or the Arab world, comes from some of our scholars and some of our Husseini poets. And so it's a very good tool to communicate with others and introduce our ideas to the public. So I don't think poetry serves only as an emotional, which it is, and that is the core of why we do it, but also it's a very good bridge builder with others who are possibly unknown or are not exposed as much to our ideology.
Look, I totally agree with you. As somebody who's experienced poetry in the way of reciting it, I find that it's a medium that is quite powerful, actually, because it attracts sometimes a different group of people or individuals, or group of groups that can be taken quite differently by the poetry, and the way the poetry is written, the way it's put together, the way it's recited, can have a big impact on people's lives, and it's generally because the idea of poetry is it uses emotion, it uses linguistic understandings, it uses culture, and it kind of fuses them all together into a very well-structured path for somebody to follow. And I find that, they're words, but then when you link them with something else, you put some melody onto them, you put them together in the form of a eulogy, you transform that word into something else. And then that can actually enter the person's heart, and you can change people's lives with it. I'm sure you've come across
I'd like to touch on that point, but before that, I think everything has to stem from Ahlulbayt. Salaam alayhim. So I'd like to start from Ahlulbayt's examples, and then I come to that because that's a very deep point. If you see our Imams in numerous occasions, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhim, have encouraged poetry for Imam Hussein specifically. Poetry in general, but poetry for Imam Hussein specifically. To the extent that Imam Sadiq alayhi salam says, even if you, write immature words, you call it poetry, you're still going to get all the rewards and the stuff. Why? Because it encourages people to be active in the message, and because you can't write without actually having a proper perception of the actual what happened, but also the depth of it. Also, the Prophet ﷺ, you see that he actually encouraged poetry. Even, for example, Hassan ibn Thabit, during AlAnsari, and I'm proud about that. Actually, my father is a poet, my grandfather is a poet. And,
I am very well aware.
Ansari seems to be good at it. So Hassan ibn Thabit was an Ansari as well. And when he documents Hadithat al-Ghadir, or the event of Ghadir, today the scholars use his poetry as actual evidence for the occurrence of that day, which is one of the most significant days in Islam. So poetry serves much more. It's a documentation tool. Now, coming back to Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, we have even a narration where someone visits the Imam salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi, and he's a reciter. And that's to encourage you to, so not just the people who write. And the Imam Salamullah alayhi orders his family to come closer to where the men sitting area is, behind the curtain, and he asks him to recite. So because of the presence of the Imam, he starts reciting the poetry in a kind of spoken words kind of way. And the Imam goes, no, I want you to recite it how you Iraqis do it, which is latmiya.
That's right.
In many ways, or na'i. So it's very interesting that the Imam Salamullah alayhim were particular about how poetry is recited to, not just that you write poetry. Because art actually, and now coming back to the modern aspect, because art and that's why we encourage people who are visual artists, we encourage people who are actually in any type of expression, to express Ashura and express Imam Hussein alayhi salam, specifically Imam Hussein, but in general, because Imam Hussein alayhi salam is the anchor point, and we're going to talk in the well-being section about the anchor point in our well-being and mental health. It's very important that you express those emotions, because it's a medium that connects, as you said, but also it's a medium that provokes emotions. And sometimes it doesn't provoke only emotions, it provokes thinking as well. So then we want to be logical, rational, emotional being, because Islam wants us to be both emotional and also logical and rational at the same time. And poetry brings those two aspects together, as well as reciting it, of course, because poetry without recitation, we have actually, I forgot the name of the scholar, but I remember he was a great poet. Once they asked him to, recite it, he said, no, I'm a good writer. Someone else has to, because he didn't have the voice or it's very important that because that's an art as well by itself, maqamat and all of these things. I would like you to talk about the reciter, because a lot of people possibly do not understand how much reciting latmiya, especially that a lot of our youth, and I encourage them to do so, I'm not discouraging anybody, they mostly copy what's, they copy Mullah Basim, or they copy the other reciters, not necessarily understanding makharij al-huruf and understanding al-maqamat or understanding al-jawab. Well, they not necessarily do that. What are the different tors and this stuff. So if you touch on that, I think it's very important, because that's an art by itself.
Absolutely. Look, my journey in this field started when I was very, very young, close to 5 to 6 years old. Mullah Basim had a very big impact on my upbringing, at the time there was no TV and there's no podcasts and there were no videos.
I remember Mullah Basim in Qom as a kid reciting, by the way.
Yeah, we used to
That
listen.
shows how old I am, but shows how old he is too.
We used to listen to the little cassettes in the little cassette player, and it used to be just on loop, everything that we would hear. And my dad kind of had a bit of a decision to make as to what we were going to do because of how interested we were, myself and my big brother. And when I first kind of got to recitation, it started off with copying. That was how it started off because I was very young. I didn't know how it was. Just like how a Quran reciter, mirroring. Yeah. All the Quran reciters now, for example, when they start off, they mirror the big readers and then they just see whichever voice they can kind of sit along and works for them, and they just follow. And that's how it started off. You start off with the very famous reciters and some of the eulogies that have had a big impact in the history of Shia Islam and non-Shia Islam as well, have, like you said, come from some of our major reciters. So when we started off very, very simple, like where is my level of voice? We joined a little group that was led by Mullah Abu Bashir al-Najafi. I'm sure you've heard of him.
I know him very well.
Very well, yeah.
He came to Australia
in 2000, in the year 2000, 2 years before we came to Australia.
Yes.
Yeah, he came and recited, and when he came back, he gave us all of the feedback about what Australia is like, and
big respect to him.
He's a big name and one of the initial, probably very traditionalist type reciters.
We grew up based on him reciting.
Absolutely,
absolutely.
Especially the Najafi school of thought and doctrine in recitation he had a massive impact on that growing up, especially during the time of the Iraq, the problems in Iraq and the dictatorship there, and many of the Shia living outside of Iraq. He kind of revived the Najafi sense. And so we were in that group, we grew up, we learnt, and the idea was to know where the level of voice is and how you start off reciting. Obviously, it started off in the Arabic language. And you kind of, you learn. You start learning then what the poetry is like. We call them awzan, which was how the poetry is written. You know how in English we have the limerick and the haiku and the different types and the different rhyming ends and the different letters that come through and all the different words. And in Arabic poetry, which is probably one of the longest lasting poetry around civilization, it has the most complex of all poetry put together, because there are so many ways you can write the same idea. And that's why there is so much contribution from so many different poets around the world now. They have the ability to contribute because there is so much probability and computations that you can put the words together. So we learnt how the poetry was put together. We learnt what our limit was. When you start off young, it's different from when you start off older, especially when you start off young and then you go through puberty, your voice changes, and so you have to keep changing with that. And then it becomes, the more you develop as a reciter, you become your own entity. You start selecting your own style of poetry. You start understanding the place that you go to, like the majlis that you recite at is essentially what makes you choose. We're going to delve into some very personal decisions today.
Extremely, yes.
So some of the decisions that I make, for example, when I'm reciting, is that I have a triple backup for a majlis. So when I turn up, I have my main prepared stuff, but I have 2 backups for every majlis. All brand new, majority of the times, they're all brand new, written by poets. And then I look at the group and the audience. So if there is a turnout that is slightly different to what I thought it was going to be, I may choose to change. And I have actually been known among many of the centers that I change my mind up to half an hour or 1 hour before the majlis starts, because I think it's not a one size fits all.
I'd like to actually comment on that. I think any like speaker, khatib, because I do also give majalis and sometimes lectures, and also reciter. You have to read your audience. And not just read your audience, do not allow, and this is with all due respect to all center managements and all the people locally who want to, but do not allow anybody to kind of
Dictate. Yeah.
what you need to talk about. Yes, when you arrive, try to ask, with respect, understand the audience, understand what are the issues that's facing them. But then the decision should be yours based on your reading of the audience. And sometimes what I found out is, for example, when you go, 10 nights of majalis, you, by night 2, you might go, actually, guess what? I'm now swapping the whole topic. Be very upfront about it and say, I am changing the topic. And that's a very important, first of all, break. Yes, they might not invite you back again, but also I think with the poetry recitation, because sometimes I've been in situations where it's the reciter or the lecturer was awkward. Because I remember once in a city, not Sydney, another city, I was attending a majlis. The audience were possibly 50 less than 12. 3 people over like 12, and the guy started talking about parenting. That was very, very interesting, because how are you talking about parenting and they're all kids? And then I remember another majlis, a reciter who was very young, so I think when he was 13, 14, it was very cute. He was reciting, a very difficult Najafi Tor to a Lebanese audience. Who everybody was looking, going, what is
What's
he talking
happening?
about? Like, you have to read your audience, but also it requires a lot of, being brave. It's not just, it's easily said, not easily done.
Yeah, and which is why I understand why some people mirror more often, because they know what it's like. They have more confidence when they go up, but that is
Some
the
people
skill.
want they mirror just for jokes purposes. I've seen one guy do it. Even Mullah Basim, like, some people were talking next to him, maybe in the recording. He goes, Isma. He actually recites, he goes, Isma, but there's no one next to him. So sometimes mirroring is overkill.
Yeah, sometimes it is overkill. And one of the things that I noticed growing up is that the amount of subconscious change that happens to you as a reciter based on the influence of others.
Yes.
Even if it is the feedback of somebody after you finish a majlis, For example, one majlis I was reciting in Arabic, and then I tacked on a couple of poems in Farsi. Because from what I could tell from feedback I had received before, that there was going to be some audience that spoke a different language, and I could speak it, and I was asked if I could prepare something, and I read it. And when I finished, I came down, as you know, like the first minute or two, people come and say, thank you, nicely done, well done. One of the people came out of the back of the majlis, came up to me and said, what are you doing reciting in this language? Because it's the language of Ahlul Nar, the language of hell. I said, well, how am I going to answer you, at this situation? I've already
jump on that, because I really like to, let's change the discussion to that.
Yeah.
Because I really would love to talk about the languages other than Arabic.
Yeah.
See, I strongly believe, and thank you, you took us there, because I really wanted to go there. I strongly believe the service of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. See, even the ayah in the Quran is very, very clear. It says, actually, a dear brother who we had a meeting about Ashura procession just 3 days ago or 2 days ago, and he actually reminded us of this ayah. So I quote him here. We have not sent any messenger except by the language of his people. Now, lisan qawmeh. This lisan in Arabic is not just language as a spoken language. It's actually the communication and the approach. So it's very important for us to, I think, not see the service of Imam Hussein alayhi salam or recitation for Imam Hussein alayhi salam as an exclusively language-oriented service.
Absolutely.
A lot of people do fall into that trap. So what happens is that then becomes Arabic is the preference, any other language, and the same like it could happen in any other country. I'm not talking about Australia only specifically. We're going to come to our challenges as a community in a second. And we see actually a lot of successful experiences in the past. So if you look at the Persian poetry and the Farsi poetry, the eulogy for Imam Hussein in Farsi is extreme depth and very, very much oriented around the Farsi or the Persian perception of the world.
Yes.
Even like if you translate it into Arabic, possibly you can't really give it the
justice it deserves.
The justice it deserves. And then the same thing when you go to Urdu, for example. Urdu poetry and Urdu majalis and all of these things now have their own style. Like even I was talking to a friend and I said, a hadith. He goes, no, we have to do it the Urdu style. Because you have to the shouting and the, confirmation and affirmation of the point. They have their own style. But they didn't only translate word by word. They actually added the approach of how to deliver it. So the approach to deliver it is more fitted to their own communication style. I strongly believe in English we need the same. In order for the service of Imam Hussein alayhi salam to be established with foundations and becomes part of the culture. Because there's a huge difference when you are seen as intruding or utilizing a language, as opposed to you write in that language because you want to be part of that language. Like even, the other day, and I'm still in communication with them, New South Wales education, they wanted some of my poetry to be in the New South Wales syllabus. I was actually thinking, should I give some of my Husseini poetry? But I haven't decided yet, because it's kind of but that's the level we want to get to. Where actually it becomes part of the culture. Not necessarily the public culture, we don't need to do that, but at least our own, Husseini style of English. What do you think of that?
Absolutely. Look, one of the things that, to be honest, when I came to Australia from a very young age, so my recitation began in the Arabic and the Farsi language. But when I moved away from Sydney, to another state to study, there was very little Arabic programs. In fact, the predominant program was in Queensland, and it was run by Urdu speakers. So I couldn't speak Urdu at all, and their programs predominantly were in English and Urdu. And
God help you so that you can finish your studies. But anyway,
that was good. And I was invited there a few times to recite. And the first few times I went there, I said, so what am I going to read? I'm going to read in Arabic and Farsi to people who don't understand Arabic or Farsi. They're all speaking Urdu and English. And I'm hoping I'm reading a whole bunch of stuff and maybe they'll understand a few words that are common ground to both of us. And maybe I could trigger something. And then I thought to myself, from my previous experience, the English poetry isn't exactly the same. It doesn't incite the same amount of emotion. And to me, at least, when I'm delivering it at the time, I didn't feel like I lived the poetry. Because you have to live the poetry to deliver it. We call it ihsas, in Arabic. You want to be in the moment, and when you're delivering, you want to live to that epitome of the poem so you can deliver it to the audience. It's not prose fiction where you're just reading out of a newspaper or something.
Exactly.
And until one day when I was preparing a whole bunch of Arabic and Farsi poetry, and I said, this is quite futile. Me reading this to people that don't understand it makes no sense. Let me make effort to prepare something in English and see what happens. The worst that can happen is they understand what I'm saying, but they just don't get it because I don't reach them. The best thing that can happen is they at least, I've done something new. And then I prepared something very short, probably less than 5 minutes. When I was reciting it, I couldn't believe the level of interaction that I got from the people. Not just like the general population there, the general people that were coming, but even the young people, that often that don't understand, when you don't understand a language, the first thing you do is you get bored.
Sometimes you understand the language, but you might not have emotional connection with that language.
Absolutely. Or you might not understand the complexity of the language, or understand the links that you're trying to make in the poetry. But that I could see it in the eyes of the kids, I could see it in the eyes of the adults, that they made a connection. So I think that was when, and I was quite young at the time, I'd made the realization that there was a role for that. And so it became more frequent in the way I thought, in the way I started preparing. And now I try to prepare more, especially for when the audience requires it. You know, the example that you gave, a whole bunch of 12-year-olds, that would be a perfect example of using, you know, English poetry to try to send a particular message, simple English poetry to send a particular message. So I utilize it a lot now, and I get invited back to the Queensland program often actually now to do the English. And I try to do combined, because they have a very, very mixed audience now. I try to do a combined Arabic, Farsi, English. And sometimes we take it for granted. You know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us the opportunity to learn those languages. We do have to serve Ahlulbayt alayhimus salam in some way, if we can. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us the opportunity to do so, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us a nice voice, we have to use it. If He gave us the ability to write poems, we have to use it. If He gave us the ability to give lectures, we have to use it.
I'd like to comment with my own personal experience. This is a very interesting one. I remember when I was a kid, I was in Qom, we were, in school, and I hated English. I absolutely hated English, to the extent I used to say, and my twin sister actually reminds me of this, I used to say, if I grow up and become a marja, my first ruling is to ban English to make it haram. Because I used to hate it. Because, it's very difficult to read it. And also, Farsi and Arabic are very beautiful languages. And because I used to study Hausa, so it's Arabic, and Farsi in school, so I loved them both. English was for me inaccessible, and a language that you had to add that was too much, So then I grew up, and it's very interesting because I started expressing myself in English, after we moved to Australia in the 90s, and, getting the grasp of the language, and especially because it was during teenage. So then now my level of understanding went complete. I do write, although extremely limited, in Arabic and Farsi as well, poetry, but why I concentrated on English for three main reasons. I'm talking about religious poetry. One, because I strongly believe we need more, and there is a void that needs to be filled. And when I say more, it's not enough for us to have one type of poetry, or 2 publications, or 5 collections. No, we need a whole library. We need to give the reciters like yourself, who come up to the experience and say, I want to recite in English, a library of choice. Because if you don't have that, as a reciter, it's very difficult.
100%.
You just said very beautifully that you have to see the level of your voice, you have to see which maqam suits you, which tar suits you. In order for you to do that, you have to have the flexibility of the poetry as well.
Absolutely.
Because it's the resource that you're building. So I always say, I might write something that's maybe 300 years later, someone recites it. Alhamdulillah, in my grave I get thawab, why not? So the point, or may not ever be recited, but it gives choice to the reciter. That's one. So the second one is that you are actually now promoting Imam Hussein alayhi salam to a different audience. This audience could be domestic, our own, Ahlulbayt followers, or could be someone else. Our own Ahlulbayt followers, you're creating an identity and a connection to Imam Hussein alayhi salam in their hearts. And by the way, poetry is not just Imam Hussein, it's Islamic in general, but we're talking about eulogy specifically now. That's the second thing. The third aspect, which I think it's a deeper point, and I don't want to go there, but I think it's worth touching on. It actually heals you. It is a personal healing, a lot. Especially that, we grew up professionally and, in English. So it became part of our thinking, like my thinking is in English. So in order for me to actually express myself, in order for me to have a debate with myself, in order for me to reflect on things, English is the most accessible language to me. So it's very personal. So I call it healing, and I really believe it's part of healing, it's part of therapy that you write poetry for Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And you know, it's one point which you touched on, which I actually have heard from a lot of people, that English doesn't provoke emotions, it doesn't provoke tears. And the whole point of reciting Latmiya is because you want to feel it.
Yeah.
Actually, I totally disagree. Because a lot of people, for example, that guy who came and, you know, objected to the Farsi, obviously he hasn't read Farsi enough, you know. Obviously, you know, the person who says Urdu is not, you know, he hasn't read. Like, for example, one of the Urdu poets that I respect a lot, now, despite his philosophy and the stuff, and some of his philosophy is good, while some of it is possibly needs work, but Allama Iqbal Lahori, one of the greatest, you know, poets, although I don't speak Urdu, but he actually wrote in Farsi and in Arabic. For example, his poem about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, very beautiful, very beautiful. So no, I disagree, as if the Arabs are only the ones who provoke emotions. No, others could provoke emotions. The only issue is that poetry in English, or Husseini poetry in English, is not mature yet.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's not mature yet now. Now we have actually good poets in the UK, in the US, inshallah, in Australia. So we are actually, I think we're going to that maturity. Just because we don't have maturity in the Husseini Latmiyat yet, doesn't mean that it does not provoke enough emotions. We need to, that means we need to invest more in it. And that's a whole community effort. A whole community effort, because the person who has a majlis has to make sure that English is now an actual established part of their majlis. I know I'm going on a tangent, but that's a very important tangent. 90% of English majalis are tick of a box exercise. If we don't take them seriously, because the new generation, you have to talk in this language that they understand. Yes, they might understand Arabic, they might speak it at home, they might communicate with it well, but that's why I start with the 3 points I was talking about. But that healing, that's the third concept I was talking about, where it provokes your actual reflections inside you. That's the language you want. That's what Imam Hussein alayhi salam wants you to talk in. The other things, they understand you, all right, they understood the point, but did it actually change their mind? Did it shape their thinking? Did it rewire their brain? That's what you're trying to achieve. You cannot achieve that without a proper communication tool.
Yeah, just as an extension to the point of it being a ticking the box exercise, you know, I've got experience in many majalis in Australia, not just in Sydney, so I have a bit of an idea of how quite a lot of the behind the scenes works as well. You are very, very much right. A lot of the English program is, we've got to have an English program. Let's just squeeze it in there somehow. How are we going to squeeze it? Is
and
it
get
going to be
anyone who can speak up there? And
exactly, like 30 minutes, you know, before the main program starts. So the moment you do that, you say 30 minutes before the main program. What are you saying? You're saying this is not the main program.
I've heard even some of them say, while the people gather.
Exactly. It's like the mingling time.
A void, you know, a void, let's fill the void.
Or the icebreaker.
Yeah.
And I find it sometimes it can be quite disrespectful to the majlis as well. When they say, oh, we'll just tack this on so that we can get all the youngsters in, you know, and then they'll go outside, and you've seen this, I'm sure. When the English program starts, they'll go outside and then recruit all these young people and say, oh, the English program is starting now. You guys should come in. The people who don't speak English can get out, type of thing. You know, it's an indirect way of saying
I've been to majalis where I'm actually starting and then I see everybody outside having, you know, enjoying their smoking and this stuff, and they chit-chatting and laughing and this stuff, while I have literally, wallah, in one of the majalis, the maximum age was like 5. It was like
you get all the kids, and how are you going to speak to them? What kind of poetry are you going to choose?
Of course, I adapt straight away, because the service of Hussein alayhi salam, I don't care who's sitting there. However, I think it's very important that that's what we. Yes, I agree with you. Also, we have a problem with who they choose to go, because if you don't pay attention to it, like for example, sometimes I have this conversation, they don't like it, some of them, and I say, would you have allowed a kid that age to go on a minbar in an Arabic program? He goes, La astaghfirullah. Why not astaghfirullah in English? Some of them, like 16-year-old, 15-year-old, goes on top of the minbar and talks in English, and talks, and 90% of what they say needs actually filtration. You have no idea what's the knowledge that they are passing on. You have no idea if they actually understood it. Just because someone speaks, well, if it's by speaking English, then bring someone who speaks very well English and has no idea what Imam Hussein is and put him on minbar. So we have, it's not just, I think, it's harmful.
It has the potential.
It is
to cause harm.
Of course.
It has the potential to cause.
Let me call it risky.
Quite risky.
In some situations, could be harmful.
And just as an extension to the point you made about the type of poetry, and that extends to anything really, English, lecture, whatever. All the topics are on the table. But one of the things that I do when I'm selecting the poetry that I recite is that if you look at how much I look at before I choose what I want, is I filter through the language, I filter through the culture in the poem, I filter through the political affiliation in the poem, I filter through the belief that I struggle with to find a good poem that follows the proper belief without finding a way to try to detour around some of the biggest and most influential historical facts and events that happened to the Ahlulbayt. In particular, now that we're living the moments of the Fatimiyya, for example, some of the ways that I find poets try to navigate around the martyrdom and the story around the martyrdom and the avoidance of certain names, it's quite extraordinary. And so you have to be quite, from a reciter's point of view, you're always filtering through, what is this language? And I'm putting it aside. Why are they saying this in this particular context? I'm putting it aside. And I find it quite painful, actually, sometimes to find something that is the right poem for the right audience and say yes to it. I want you to shed some light as a poet. What are some of the things that you look at as the standards of, let's say, an accepted poem by the Ahlulbayt alayhim salam?
I think I really love your question. I strongly believe this is an important point that we need to really go into depth, and I would like to answer it. Before that, I just want to put a disclaimer. So when you operate in healthcare, you learn what disclaimers. When I said earlier that a 15 or 16-year-old, you put them on top of the minbar, I meant unsupervised. It's very different. For example, in Najaf, let me give a very living example. For example, the Dujaili family, who actually recite for my father, they recite for my grandfather, they recite for Maraja. They call them the Maraja Khutaba. Allah yarhamhum, Sheikh Salih al-Dujaili, and his sons now, Sheikh Abdullah, Sheikh Hafidhu. Their father used to do it, and they do it. When they're young, they lead them, before they go on top of the minbar, to go and do na'i for a bit, recite for a bit, and then the father or the older brother goes up and does the majlis. And by this, you're giving them encouragement, you're teaching them. They supervised.
Absolutely.
You are actually now bringing up the next generation. Or even Mullah Basim, for example, used to do it with some of the youngsters who come in front of him and recite, and then he will do it. But see, they are supervised. And the main event is the actual mature event that's going to follow. That is the correct way. I am not saying that we shouldn't be teaching oratory to our 100%. Kids. Or
we're not discouraging 15-year-olds from going up on the minbar. I would love 15-year-olds and 13-year-olds to go up on the minbar. Yeah.
But see, that's why, for example, we encourage people to go to Hawza. A lot of people say, we have Hawza, we have online. Well, yes, you have all of those. That's a great resources. But that is not enough for Hawza. Why? Because Hawza is also about tarbiyah. And tarbiyah can only happen when you are actually surrounded by that environment.
Yeah, of course.
That environment, whether it be Najaf, Karbala, Qom, whatever it is, Mashhad, whatever it is, we don't like specifying location, but you need that exposure to the scholars. Now you live within a family that's all scholars, that's a different kind of environment, but the environment has to be that religious environment, because your decision making, your interaction, how do you decide, all of that needs to be built in your character, which is similar to, for example, medical education. You can't have a nurse who doesn't actually get exposed to nursing. You can't have a doctor who doesn't actually get exposed to that. It's very important. Peer-to-peer support and peer-to-peer learning is actually very much part of how you grow up. It's not actually only, studying, I've finished Sharia. Why? Because I did some lectures online. With all my due respect to Hawza, I'm not trying to say that. But it's very important we expose the tarbiyah. That's why it's actually tarbiyah and ta'lim. Even some of our maraja, for example, Mirza Jawadi Amali, he visited Najaf last year, and his very small talk there was very beautiful. I really loved it. He goes, there is ilm, there's knowledge, there is there is teacher, muallim, and there is the ta'lim. The most important thing in this triangle is the muallim. Who is teaching you? Because the muallim is not only passing the knowledge, anyone can pass the knowledge. He has to pass the thinking. He has to pass the decision making. Of course, Sheikh didn't go that depth, but I think that's what he meant. It's the muallim who becomes your role model, who actually establishes your personality. This is needed in the Husseini Khidmah as well, not just in Hawza. So when you become a reciter, go and seek. For example, you said it very beautifully now, Sheikh Abu Bashir, or Sheikh Mullah Bashir. There's another guy on it, Sheikh Abu Bashir. Mullah Bashir, for example. Mullah Jalil, for example, Mullah Basim, all these, great reciters, we grew up on them reciting, but a lot of people learned from them. Them were also influenced by the, Mullah Hamza Al-Saghir or Mullah Watan or the others. So the thing that passes on through generations needs the tarbiyah bit as well. And
let me give you a little.
Only can happen when you expose them in person.
I'll give you a little anecdote. One of the majalis when I was first starting, the name was Hayat Ushaq Al-Hussein, and in fact some of the biggest names in reciters have come from that hay'ah. Sheikh Zaman Al-Hasnawi, Mullah Muhammad Baqir Al-Khaqani, Mullah Sayyid Salam Al-Husseini, quite
respect to all of them.
Big names, mashallah, big
and
salam
on the right
to all
path.
of them. On the right path.
Some people could have good names,
with alhamdulillah, with a good aqidah, mashallah. We used to have a setup where every Thursday and Friday nights we used to have a majlis, and we used to go, and there would be 3 reciters. One reciter would do the muqaddama, which is the introduction poem, and one reciter would do the main qasida, which is usually given to a senior figure because it requires quite a lot of energy and power and control. And then one reciter would do the nazla. So there was a schedule, and then you would put your name down, and then they would select. And then Mullah Abu Bashir would be the first person who would be there to kind of supervise everything. So essentially you recited, and then at the end they would serve some dinner, and there is an open discussion about what everybody recited and what else they could do to do it correctly. On one of my recitations, I used to recite the muqaddama only because I was quite young, and that was the thing that was allocated to. One night I went up. The traditional thing that we did out of respect to the Ahlulbayt salamullah alayhim was to kiss the mimbar before we go up, recite, come down, kiss the mimbar, and then leave. That's the general thing that you did because of the level of respect that you have for the majlis. So I recited that night, kissed the mimbar first, went up, read quite an emotional poem, and it incited quite a significant amount of emotion in the audience. And as I came down, I was quite overwhelmed by the emotion, and I didn't kiss the mimbar. So I forgot, and then went. For me, generally I kind of step down and stand next to the minbar. That night I stepped down and walked quite a long distance away. And as the second person was going up, I still remember to this day, Mullah Abu Bashir called out my name in front of at least 100 people there, lined up in the majlis, waiting for the second person to go up. Called out my name in front of everybody. He said, go back and kiss the minbar. You've forgotten to do this. I didn't feel embarrassment. I didn't feel shame. I didn't feel anything. I had realized and went back to kiss the minbar. Since then, you're talking about when you're raised upon a culture, when you're raised by the seniors, when you learn. Since then, I never did that again.
The first few years when I started, reciting, I don't do recitation a lot. I do lectures. Not as much, as, professional, but I do it for the service of Muhammad alayhi salam. The first few years, I used to refuse to go on top of the minbar. Until, very recently I started because of and that one I feel a lot of heavy burden.
Responsibility.
That I'm going, there. And where I learned that, actually from my own father, respects to Ayatollah AlAnsari, and I've seen it in my other family members, not just. Whenever they go and there's a member, they will ask for a chair and they sit on the chair. They go, no, that member is for the Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Even till now, he teaches in Sheikh Al-Ansari Mosque in Najaf, and he uses a chair to sit.
I have realized.
Despite the fact there are hundreds of students sitting, he doesn't sit on the member because that's service Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Specifically. So you learn that when you actually exposed to it.
Absolutely.
When you live it. That's, I think a lot of people don't realize, and that's why it's a word of encouragement. Inshallah, if there's no action items from this.
Oh, no.
One single action item is that expose yourself. We have even a hadith from Ahlulbayt salamullahi alayhim where it says, Zahimul ulama. See, he doesn't say, go visit the ulama. He says, Zahimul ulama. Annoy them.
That's right.
Annoy them is basically you exposure. And that's why I always tell people, there are 3 exposures we need in our community. Now let's talk Australia now.
Yeah.
3 exposures we need in our community. First of all, we need to expose our kids to mosques, masajid. The masjid, Imam Ali alayhi salam has a very beautiful hadith. I don't want to go into it, but please do, for anyone in the audience, look it up, where he talks about the benefits of actually going to the masajid all the time. So that's one. Secondly, exposure to scholars, but real scholars. Trust me, when our youth are exposed to the real scholars, you don't need to worry about them now. As soon as someone comes who's controversial, someone comes who's fake, they can spot them.
Yeah.
Why? Because they already know. They already know the quality and recognize the quality they need to adhere to. So they know this is not Ahlulbayt style. That's the second. The third one, we need to expose them more to the Khidmah al-Husayniyah. It is not enough for me to wait for my son who's 15-year-old to make him volunteer. No, he's 2, bring him to the thing, give him some
something to do.
Tissues
to
give up. Expose them to Khidmah al-Husayniyah from their young age. These 3 should be embedded. If there's no action items from today, these 3, please. That's I would like everybody, and inshallah Allah gives us the tawfiq that we actually apply it as well.
Absolutely, because it's the recipe for success, isn't it? Because one of the things I heard one of the lecturers say once was that Mambar al-Hussein madrasa. Says that the pulpit of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam is a school. At the time, I have to tell you, I didn't really understand what they meant. Like, what do they mean, madrasa? What does that mean? Now that I have kids of my own, and you do too, you understand. All you have to do is bring them and put them in the environment. They probably won't understand a single word that is said on top of that pulpit, but the context around it, how they come, what they dress, who they talk to, what happens, even the food that is given, the amount of generosity that you see, the amount of emotion, when you're a child and you see a grown adult crying, on the events of Fatimiyya or in the events of Ashura. In itself, that triggers the question, so why is this adult crying? I've never seen an adult cry in my school. I've never seen an adult cry in the streets. So why is this adult crying here? And they ask themselves that question, and then they might come home and ask you, why were there a whole bunch of people crying? So we really, and I'm 100% with you, we really need to be actively trying to, and ever since COVID and everything else that has happened, there's been this move towards, I'm going to watch everything online. Yes. Well, the truth is, you're not going to watch everything online.
Do it. No, do it. Don't. It's like, for example, someone comes and says, but I'm going to do pay sadaqah.
Yeah.
I don't need to pay, da'am for Husseiniya. Like, I don't need to contribute to Husseiniya. I already pay sadaqah. Well, pay sadaqah and pay for the Husseiniya.
Yeah.
Like, nobody said, like, one, actually, and if you have $1, then give 50 cents here and give 50 cents there. Yeah. Who said that your $1 has to go to one cause? Coming back to the original question you asked, because I think that's a very important one, I would like to encourage both of us to talk about this parenting bit in the other section. We're going to talk about well-being, because I strongly believe that parenting and how to expose your kids is a very important one. But I think I would like to keep it for the health and this stuff. And I'd like to finish this before we go to the answer that question with actually during this trip to Arba'in, when we came together back,
which I caught you on the tail end of when you're getting back
from Najaf. I visited Ayatollah al-Azma Sheikh Bashir al-Najafi, Allah yahfadhah. So when we were sitting there, he told us a story, very interesting story. He goes in Pakistan. The person who created Habib Bank, and he said this is a very major bank in Pakistan that everybody knows. The person who established it, he was actually a Pakistani Shia, and he used to spend his money in Ashura to cook for non-Muslims, not for Muslims. Non-Muslims, and he would cook for them and this stuff and spread the. So some people came to him and said, what you doing? Like, with all this wealth and this stuff, you're cooking the food for the non-Muslims in Ashura. Why don't you cook them for majalis? You give it to the... He goes, there's a point. I am exposing them to the love of Imam Hussein alayhi salam through food. Because this is a food that dedicated to Imam alayhi salam. So I want to feed them, not now, but maybe some of their descendants, because of the barakah of this food, come back to Imam Hussein alayhi salam. So I think exposure isn't only because we have to go to part of the Quran and part of our message is alam al-ghayb kadhalik.
Of course.
It's not everything is the seen, it's also the world of unseen. You never know what are the impact and the effects of these exposures. We shouldn't see exposures only for my parenting purposes. It has much deeper. So actually I encourage everybody to expose their friends as well. I sometimes, when I could, especially to Ashura procession, for example, in the day of Ashura, I actually encourage my friends who are not Muslim, and they attended. I actually, even my brother brought his professors and the stuff to his PhD supervisor. So it's very important we actually bring our friends. It's all right, bring them, let them see, let them eat from the food. Even like when we have majalis in Ashura, my father has this habit of asking us to spread the food to our neighbors. Some of we have a Greek neighbor. He goes, I don't cook during those 10 days. So tell me when the 10 days come. So this is why, because you are actually, that's how you spread the love of Ahlulbayt alayhim salam. You don't know the exposure. Just do your part. Now coming back to answering.
I think our question was regarding poetry and the
parameters or
the parameters scope. And the scope, which is a big topic. But I think you would shed some good light into this, because for me as a reciter, I struggle a lot in terms of selecting the appropriate poetry. So tell me about how you go about writing something and what are your parameters.
So I'm gonna say it from my end, and then I would like to say it as a formula for the audience, because I think not only the person who writes poetry needs to make sure that the parameters are respected, also the person reciting it. So you're a primary example, and the third one is the people who are actually listening to it or reading it. We can only fix and ensure we have a proper system where everybody adheres to it. If the audience don't object, because sometimes I've seen the audience that they go, oh, it's all right, he recited it, we're going to be upset. Well, why not? You know, if you actually question a concept there, or you think it might be actually misleading people, or you feel that it's actually taking people away from Imam Hussein alayhi salam, or painting a picture of the Imam that's not appropriate, speak up. So it's very important for us that the audience are part of that policing and performance reviews, if we want to call them and use professional language. It's not just the reciter and the poet, and I accept whatever they give me. Now, from the perspective of poetry, and some of the scholars have talked about this, you know, who am I to be talking about this when we have, you know, scholars who actually have given us parameters. But from my perspective in personal life, I have, let's say, 3 main parameters. And how I apply them, I'm going to talk about it. The first parameter, how does this fit within our beliefs? For example, Imam Sadiq alayhi salam says, قولوا فينا ما شئتم ونزهونا عن الربوبية. Say whatever you wish about us, but keep us, you know, away from let's say, you know, the godly or concept. It's very important, like, you know, how not sell the Imam short, neither exaggerate to the extent of mughalat. And that's a very, 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 very specific, you know.
It's a short window.
It's very short window. It's a very fine line.
Yeah.
And if you don't know that fine line, you can fall into any of the two. So how can you keep that? But also don't humanize the Imam to the extent that you actually disrespect that divine status. So you have to be very, very much within that parameter. And it's a very, very thin line. So that's the first. The second one, and by the way, part of that is not contradicting any aqidah, not contradicting anything else. The second thing which is very important is akhlaq. Akhlaq, both in the term of the language and the vocab you use, but also akhlaq in the terms of, I am talking about an imam. So maybe some of the stuff to be said about the imam is a bit too, you know,
too lax.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, that's the best way to say it.
Yeah.
So be very careful from that perspective. And akhlaq in general, you know, something that's respectful to the audience.
So you're talking about the morals of the poetry.
Ahsant.
Yeah.
Ahsant.
So the poem has its own morals. How are you referring to the Imam?
Exactly.
How are you referring to it?
If you write expressive poetry in your own life, you're reflecting about
That's
your
different.
own yourself and mates. By all means, poetry should be by
Open.
all means free and open. But when you talk about the Imam, you have a message to pass, whether you like it or not. You can't just say, "Oh, poetry is a free form. What can I do?" No. There's no such a thing. Freedom. When you talk about the Imam, salamullah alayhi, you have to be respectful, and you have to be respectful of the audience, respectful to the Imam himself first. So that's a very important one. The third parameter, which I think is very important, is making sure that. And I'm not trying to say don't be political or anything like that, because sometimes some people want to, and that's their personal business. But do not use Ahlulbayt to promote a self-centric message.
Yeah.
Ahlulbayt are not there to be used for your own gains.
And they're not means to an end.
Ahsant.
Yeah.
Or whoever you are affiliated with. And again, I give the disclaimer, I'm not talking just political, I'm talking about everything. You know, you want to promote your own culture, you want to promote your own way of life, you want to promote your politics, you want to promote an affiliation you have. Be careful, do not put Ahlulbayt into it. Part of that, so there's one level to that, there's another level to that. Do not think of Ahlulbayt and the Imam as only emotional being just like yourself, and try to humanize him like I am feeling. Do that, but be careful. Be careful between the two. Because we have, like for example, I'll give you a very good example. One of the channels on from the community, they shared a video by one very respected, you know, young, you know, reciter in our community, where it talks about you know, Fatima Zahra salamullah. And then he talked about, the Prophet called her Abiha because he was an orphan and she gave him. Like, calm down. this breaks all the three parameters we talked about. First of all, you broke the parameter that you actually don't understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself says, وَمَا يَنطِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا وَحْيٌ يُوحَىٰ أو ما هو إلا وحي يوحى. You cannot, he never talks of his own desires. Everything he utters is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He calls her Abiha because he's lacking, in
He doesn't have a mom and he's in need of a mother.
That's the second thing, which is disrespect. So that's the akhlaq bit. You're actually being disrespectful to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself. The third layer, which is thing, you're using that to promote your own version, because there are actual, let's say some people who like to say that, and there is some figures that have said that. Unfortunately,
there is a particular school of thought.
Yes. So they were promoting their school of thought using that. Well, calm down. First of all, you are actually just being disrespectful to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You're contradicting Quran itself. And on the third level, you're using it for their own message. So it's very important for us, and I'm usually very, very politically correct, but when it comes to Zahra, I can't be politically correct. It's very important for us to understand that when I'm speaking or when I'm writing poetry, am I serving a message, or am I actually serving a personal agenda? That personal agenda, sometimes I can see it as a community agenda, or sometimes I can see it as a political agenda, or sometimes I can see it an ummah agenda, micro or macro level. Yeah. It's very important that I remember I am actually within the service of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. So that's I think a very important one. How do you apply it? And I would like you to also comment on that. I think how do you apply it is, first, read your poetry once, twice, 3 times, 10 times. And think of every single word. You can't ask ChatGPT to review it for you. You actually have to review it with those lenses in. That's why a poet from a poet are different. Because some poets actually, and for example, I once I shared some lines of poetry that my father's written with an audience, but I didn't say it's my father's. Straight away, one of them said, "This should have been written by a scholar." I knew, but I asked him why. He goes, because it's respectful, it's within parameter, and it's very deep. I go, yes, exactly. It's very important that your poetry, when people read it, they go, okay, I know that whoever has written this is aware. Now, you don't have to be a scholar, but aware. That's one. So read every single word you have used. Secondly, ask others. We have to be humble, We have to have the humility. When I said, read your audience and then decide yourself. Yes, but ask others as well before you decide. Yeah. And there's a lot of people who are in the service of Imam Hussein. I actually would like to mention a name who I always, my cousin from London who's studying in Najaf, Ibrahim AlAnsari. Inshallah, Sheikh Ibrahim soon.
Inshallah soon.
I always discuss with him, this is my poetry. Another person I discuss with is even yourself. We always share about these things. There are people that I trust and I understand it always, and then they do the same. When he wrote a book about Maqtala from Hussein alayhi salam, he shared it with me. I reviewed it for him. So it's very important that you build a support network.
In the academic circles, we call it peer review. This is part of how we look at
exactly
content.
Would I publish anything without peer reviewed? I wouldn't even.
No one even look at you.
Yes, exactly. You're disrespecting yourself before anyone else. So it's very, very important. And also the third thing that I do, and to keep it very brief, is I sleep on it. I never write something because I am, I have to get it in. Sleep on it. Because you have no idea what sort of message going to come your way. Sometimes, wallah, some message comes to you or something happens and you go, oh, I know. Let me fix that.
Yeah, look, to give you a live example of that, when I select a particular poem, I print it out. I am very anti-mobile phone at the moment for multiple reasons, but particularly for this reason is I print it out relatively large font so I can see it. I read it to myself first, and then I read it out loud, and then I put the appropriate changes or even the pauses it's not just how do I pronounce a word, but where do I pause so that I send the correct message. If I pause 1 second earlier, I might actually send the wrong message. So where am I going to pause? And I've been known to make little marks on the paper about where do I pause, where do I start, where's my next line. And the second thing I do is if there's anything I'm not sure about, I call my mum, because she was very instrumental in growing up as a child. As I grew up, obviously I didn't know how to write Arabic or Farsi or any of the languages. So she used to write out many of the poems for me when I was reading them, and she's quite very, very well versed in some of the pronunciations, the letters, and the when what letter comes out at what point. Makharij al-huruf, we call them. And then, how do you say it? In what context? In what emotional context? How do you present it?
Is it with pride or is
exactly
it
with sadness?
With sadness, or it's very, very different.
And so when I call my mum and I ask her, how do I pronounce this? So I send her a message. And if it's a very particularly technical poem that is, for example, written with in Arabic Fusha, مثلا, in a very original Arabic language, I would send it to the people of experience, and I'd say, does this make sense? This actually happened to me in one of my recitations during the Arba'in event, and there was a sentence there that kind of went along the lines that if they told me that the love of Imam al-Hussein is a dhanb, then I would want to do that dhanb. That was what the poetry said. But the poetry actually had it as if the love of Imam al-Hussein was a dhanb, that I would accept it. When I sent it to somebody to review, he said, that would be inappropriate to say. Because the hub of Imam al-Hussein will never be a dhanb. So you cannot assume, you can't even assume that is the case. But he said you could change it to say, if they said the hub of Imam al-Hussein can be a dhanb, that's different to what, that does not give it the possibility of it actually being that. So the examples, the choice of the words, the examples of who you send them to, you cannot say, ignorance cannot be your defense. When you're reading the poem, you can't say, actually, I didn't know about that.
In every type of service. Yeah. I remember you just reminded me, I once was reciting here in Sydney. And as I was speaking, my father walked in. And that in itself is a huge challenge. First of all, any khatib or speaker who spoke and my father in the audience, they would know he will actually pick on you.
I have seen many
because that's
times.
what the scholars are expected of them, they have to, so that's one. And secondly, he's my father at the end of the day. So I was like, okay, now, let me not forget the point. And I kept going. And I said, and I was talking about, Imam Hussein alayhi salam, I said, in order for the companions of Imam Hussein alayhi salam to get to the high status, they have to understand who Imam Hussein alayhi salam is. So when they are coming to the help of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, they're coming to the help of the manifestation of Allah's will on earth. That's how they have to understand him. So then they are not seeing him as an individual who's called Hussein ibn Ali and I'm helping. But the divine status of
it's
the
not
Imam.
just materialistic.
It's not just materialistic. So I finished, and I was making sure, I was sure that was correct. So then when he walked to the car, I walked with him. He goes, that was correct, but you had to make a disclaimer that even if a person came and helped Imam Hussein alayhi salam, for example, Wahab, the Christian guy, to help Imam Hussein just because he was asking people to help, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will elevate his status because the Imam is the manifestation is the same. So make that. But that person would have much higher status because he knows of the Imam. So yes, that's a higher status, but the other person will still have very, very high divine. So be sure that your audience don't misunderstand that distinction. So next day I started my lecture. I said, look, I have to explain. And I said the story that happened, and I explained that point. I was actually very thankful because that made, of course, it's a very good lesson for me, for my beliefs, but also made the audience benefit from much deeper lesson.
Yeah.
So I think it's very important to, exercise humility as well and accept when we're given those deeper points, especially by someone who's more an expert in what they do.
Just as an additional point that I wanted to make about the audience being your giving you feedback. I think this in our community in Australia does not happen very often.
No.
And it is very unfortunate.
It's very unfortunate.
Because I would love to know what I can improve on. When I'm reciting, there are times when I may miss. I'm a human. I'm prone to making a mistake. I may mispronounce a word. I may present an idea that is completely wrong. And some people say, oh, no, we'll just let it slide. Oh, no, we won't. And I think this is potentially contributing to some of the problems that we're having in the community.
Once I was reciting in a majlis here in Sydney, and when I finished, an elderly gentleman, especially despite the fact I was speaking in English, and I know he does not speak a word of English, he came to me and said, look, I have a bit of feedback, but because I know you're, care about these things, whether I give it but not give it, I said, no, please go ahead. He said, when you mentioned the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you say sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you don't say wa alihi wasallam. So I wanted to, just in case, I said, no, I actually say it very, very fast. Yeah. So maybe you don't see. So I thanked him. Now when I say it, I say sallallahu alaihi wa alih. I stop. So make sure that I say it and nobody understands it as wasallam. Because obviously it's also teaching our next generation how to say it properly. So I don't want to fall into that trap. I appreciated it a lot. I would have never known that from the audience perspective, they're actually not hearing the wa alihi very clearly. Sometimes feedback actually makes you perform better.
100%.
And I've seen areas where when people got feedback, they got very upset. Some of them leave the majlis, don't want to come back. That is not Ahlulbayt way.
Yeah.
Ahlulbayt way is peer-to-peer support and peer-to-peer learning. I think
and it can be, the feedback can be constructive. It's mostly constructive criticism. How you give it is also, waiting.
The attitude, the approach, the audience. Make sure it's private. All of these things.
I think that's important, and I encourage
giving the benefit of the doubt to the person while saying it. Like, for example, when this guy gave me feedback, it was very nice when he said, I am sure you say it, but to the audience, it sounds like. So it's a very important kind of, I think, the approach you take.
I think it's really important, and if we use this platform to kind of be a bit, and this is applicable not just to Australia, even in the majalis all around the world, is that if you find some area within the recitation, I wish it was possible for me to go up to some of our lecturers and say, look, this example that you gave was not quite there, or this riwayah that you said is just like inappropriate, like where you got it from, it's not from the right spot, you haven't got the right context. I wish I could say that, but sometimes I just feel like I just can't.
Do you want to go there?
I don't want to go there, but what I want to say is...
Because I'm only responding to you with sighing. That's it. Unfortunately, a lot of times, some of the lectures, and intentionally, inshallah, unintentionally, some of them maybe have their own agendas, but mostly are intentionally. They not only possibly disrespect or go out of the parameter, sometimes it's absolute kufr. Sometimes it's what they're committing is unacceptable. And I have to come back to where we started, and if you want to end the podcast here, I think but we started there. I would like to come back to it. Center management. See, we have a hadith from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He says, when you sit and listen to somebody speaking, through them you either worshipping Allah or shaitan. If they are speaking of what Allah has said, then you're worshipping Allah.
Then you are obedient. Yeah.
If they are speaking of what the shaitan pleases or pleased with, you're actually worshipping shaitan. How many of our center management think about the speaker who comes and make sure that they filter out what the person is saying? How many do that? It's very important. Center management is not only about me providing this very beautiful building and, you know, making sure the food is ready and making
and
sure
the beautiful poster, and I've got this name person coming and this eulogist coming.
Even if the
and
person is the greatest speaker of all times, and their oratory skills is like, you know, something that Allah has never created before.
Exceptional.
Because some people would like to be referenced in those terms. What are they saying? And by inviting that speaker, who am I promoting? Am I promoting? Because some people, what do they tell you? Oh, you know, no. Look, this person have said wrong things on that member, but I will make sure he won't say that in my member. No. It's not about what he said in your member. It's about you promoting that individual to go up in the member of Muhammad Hussein alayhi salam. So you're creating a culture where people go, oh, but he recited here and there, so he should be good. So I think we come back to that. If the audience make sure they communicate their complaints and say, well, wait a second, your speaker tonight said this, that's contradictory to our beliefs. Or he denied, for example, a certain historical fact because he just wanted to please whatever political affiliation
and it's happened so many times where
it's very common.
See it.
It's very common, especially, unfortunately, in Sydney. You know, a couple of years ago, I was in Cardiff. SubhanAllah, it was the first Ashura I wasn't in Sydney. I was reciting there in the UK. You know, mashallah, few speakers, you know, because usually I, you know, pick up a phone, but it became so common that you have to chase it, and then you just go like, nobody said al-amr bil ma'ruf wa nahy anil munkar. If you look at actually the Quran and the references to amr bil ma'ruf wa nahy anil munkar, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about people being punished because they left al-amr bil ma'ruf wa nahy anil munkar. That's promotion of the virtue and you know, getting people to leave the vice. That is part of our actual you know,
duties.
It's duties. How many of us do it these days? Why? Because either because I'm respectful. Be respectful. Nobody said amr bil ma'ruf wa nahy anil munkar. You have to go in the middle of the crowd or be on Facebook and just slander people. Nobody says that. Al-amr bil ma'ruf wa nahy anil munkar is with akhlaq, with approach, with the right to communicate. And if you can't approach the person, then approach the center management who brought him. If 100 people of the audience object, trust me, no center management will ever bring someone who's misguided. It's a community effort. So I know this will be controversial. I know some people wouldn't like me commenting like this, but I think we have to remind ourselves, this is a reflection to myself before everybody else. As a community, we have to be active in filtering out who is who. This is not against anybody, by the way. You know, everybody can do mistakes. Everybody could unintentionally say things. It is actually to make sure the tarbiyah we talked about is applied.
And you know, I think just as a point to try to close this out is, you know, even if it is difficult to give feedback, one of the things that one of the centers did, which I really, really liked, is after their Muharram program, they had invited a pretty big speaker at the time, and there was quite a lot of feedback that I was hearing on the floor after each night, but that wasn't kind of moving on to management. And sometimes the feedback can come a bit late as well. Like if you've got a 13-night program, you don't want to hear about the feedback on the 13th night, you know. You want to hear about it on the first and second.
Make sure you get it there.
But you want to get it somewhere.
Exactly.
And so one of the things this center did, was they did an anonymous survey. So they actually put up QR codes in the location, and they have a message system where they sent their usual announcements, and they sent the QR code and the link, and it was all anonymous. And they asked you, what did you like about the program? What didn't you like about? What can you improve? And I think we should be utilizing that from a center management point of view, if you don't want to be receiving feedback face to face of some angry people or some people that have some more controversial and more confrontational feedback, you might want to put it down in an anonymous way. And if center management wants to facilitate that, they could do it in an anonymous way. There are different ways of doing it, and I think, and this extends not to just speakers. You know, I think from your experience, you've come across speakers, but you know, inviting a eulogist who is very well known in utilizing quite involved musical tones and instruments in quite a lot of their work. You know, the fact that you invite them over,
I mean everybody,
and I want to make sure that we're actually exploring.
Actually passes on a message.
Absolutely,
that could be a speaker who's basically, you know, for a conference. It could be a professor or whoever it is. It could be you know, a eulogist or you know, a radud. It could be a speaker. It could be a scholar. It could be anyone.
We have to be very mindful, and you know, at the end of the day, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to be questioning each and every one of us about our role in promoting that particular event. You know, you promoted something inappropriate. At the same time, you will be rewarded if you promoted something that was appropriate, and you filter. One of the center managements told me that they listened to every lecture live and every eulogist live in their center function, and they listen to it afterwards. I mean, that's quite a lot of commitment. And they say we choose our speakers based on what they said here and what they've done before. There are some.
This is also an invitation to reciters, whether you know, speakers, whether lecturers. By the way, I differentiate between speaker, like I myself, I'm just a speaker, not khatib. I strongly believe you need to be qualified to be there. You know, or you know, a radud or any other person who's coming, encouraging them for themselves to reflect back as well.
Absolutely.
Watch your own lecture, you know, after you finished it. Watch your own performance after. First of all, you can see what's going on, but also I always, without fail, watch every single lecture after I finished it. Again. And if I didn't like something, I would reverse back. If they didn't have recording, because some majalis might not have recording or streaming or anything like that, I actually put the voice recorder. And I pay attention to it. Yeah. Why? Because I'm responsible in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for every single word I uttered. And if I see I misquoted something or I didn't say it properly, the next day I will actually make sure I correct it. This is extremely important. And by the way, I didn't learn it from this is myself. I learned it from seeing the other scholars who they do it. You know, and that's why we come back to the concept of tarbiyah.
Yeah.
So you make sure that you, and do not feel, and this is a trap of human beings. We all do feel, all of us fall into that trap. Don't feel you're above something. We all can do mistakes. We all can have misjudgment. We all can misquote things. We all can fall in the, other than the 14 ma'soom, there's no one infallible, you know, and of course the Anbiya. It's very important for us to be that self-reflection, because that's how you build character.
100%.
That's how you build, you become actually better at your job, not just better religiously, but better at your job.
Yeah, I mean, you and I both going through medical school, one of the things that was quite a significant part of our examination was self-reflection tool.
Yeah.
You know, we had to write out essays. In your portfolio, as part of your day-to-day encounters. You know, what didn't you like? What happened? You self-reflect, and that is.
And if you remember the first few years when you have the clinical days, the most important thing was communication style with the patients, where you don't only have the clinical tutor, but you have your other, peers. To actually watch you taking history, doing anything, and then giving you feedback. That's what I mean by Hausa needs to, Hausa does provide that. It's very important to have that tarbiyah, that's exposure, where your peers give you feedback. That's how you grow.
Okay. So I think this is a great segue for us to now move on to the second and probably equally as important topic of the day, And that is, we've put it under the title together. We've spoken about this. We've put it under the title of well-being, and we've probably pointed to a few of the, areas and themes within our discussion already, in the context of Ahlulbayt alayhim salam, and in particular in the context of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam. How can we utilize the majalis and the Ahlulbayt to promote our well-being?
A very beautiful topic, and I strongly believe you would have much in depth than me, but we help each other and bounce back and forth. I think I'm going to talk personal experience, and then I would like to talk about concepts and making it into kind of agendas and all of these things. Personal experience, and again we go back to where we ended and where we started. It's all about tarbiyah.
Yeah,
it's all about tarbiyah. That's why when the poets say, and this is a very famous لا عذب الله أمي إنها شربت حب الوصي وغذتني باللبن وكان لي والد يهوى أبا حسن فصرت بين ذي
من ذي وذا
أهوى أبا حسن
اللهم صل
صلوات الله وسلامه عليهم أجمعين. It's a very important thing that it starts from the mom and the dad. How can I, and as a person, I grew up where Imam Hussein alayhi salam was part of the nurture in my household. I grew up where Imam Ali alayhi salam, like when I go to ziyarah of Imam Ali alayhi salam, and you have a very beautiful picture of Imam Ali behind you, it's like I do ziyarat Aminullah because it's the most authentic, and also it's short, so I then can chat to the Imam. I actually, as I'm approaching, I feel very heavy, and as I'm leaving, I feel very light. I chat with the Imam because the relationship doesn't become a relationship of I'm visiting my Imam. It becomes a relationship where, I don't know, you kind of see him as part of you. He becomes your refuge. He becomes your and the same with Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Just Imam Ali because I had the picture behind you, so I wanted to reflect, with respect to the Imam salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. It's very important for us to bring up or create an environment where our kids, al-Khidma al-Husayniyya for me, the first memories in my life, because I don't remember from my early childhood except very emotional memories, as the normal. The first is my father in prison, and asking why was he in prison, because he walked to Karbala in Arba'in. That's the first memory in my life. So then you grow older and you just go, oh wow, okay. So that's, my father was happy, and then he was sentenced to, to death, and then whatever happened afterwards. So it's very important that it becomes, now I'm not saying anybody has to go to that extreme, but it becomes, oh wow, so walk for Imam Hussein alayhi salam, you give everything for it.
And you would be so conflicted, as a child, for something as trivial as walking to the shrine of someone who supposedly has passed away is a major crime that you go to prison for. So it is quite illogical as a child. It wouldn't make sense.
Yeah, but it's embedded now. Or the second memory I have from being a child is I used to go with my father to Beit Bahr al-Ulum, actually. And I remember we used to go to the La'gud, the alleyways of Najaf, and we would then go into a Sardab, so
the underground bunker.
And that's where we used to attend the majalis, and you would see like all the maraja and big scholars of Najaf attending, just keeping it quiet, no mic, no nothing, so that, I remember those days. And those days were the early memories I have. And, then I grew up older and the stuff. That is the exposure. That is kind of the exposure you need, where your kids' first memories, it's like the first memory of seeing your mom feeding you. It's the first memory of seeing your dad carrying you. It's the first memory of seeing the relationship and the service to Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And the fear and this stuff, and you see everybody's like watching, and before you leave, that I think embeds it in you. And then as you grow older, you see your father, no matter what his status is, or your mom, no matter who she is, service Imam Hussein, they will come and give water out, and or sit on the ground and put the shoes properly, and you just go, oh, my dad would never do that, but in those days he would do that, Or I saw, and one day in Arba'een, for example, early on, this is not childhood, but I remember walking and I saw one professor from the medical faculty in Kufa University, who I happened to know because I was visiting academic there, and I remember him. If you say salam to him, he would look at you, do you deserve a reply or not? Yet during Arba'een, he was sitting on the chair begging people. He was like trying to, if you have any problems, like his orthopedic surgeon, with all my respect to orthopedic surgeons, they're all very good people, but not all, but many of them. He would actually, when he couldn't find anybody who needs musculoskeletal thing, he was actually asking it in front of me, and he goes, would you like me to give you a foot massage? And I was going, wow, okay. Wow. That humility. Yeah. So I'm sure because he was exposed to it since childhood, and I'm sure because he grew up in that environment, that it became part of him. It's for Imam Hussein. Who am I? What's my titles? Whatever I've studied, whatever wealth I have, it's nothing. It's Imam Hussein alayhi salam. That is called anchor. How can we? It's like a ship, and subhanallah, Ahlulbayt salamullah alayhim, they use
these examples.
People don't actually see it. Safinatul Najat. What does Safinatul Najat means? If I imagine myself in the turbulence of life, it's like I am on a sea, and I'm being, washed away and being thrown by the waves. I can only stay steady if I have an anchor. That anchor should be Imam Hussein. And that anchor should be Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then whoever Allah orders us to follow and love, then we do it. That's the proper way.
Al-wasila.
And not just the wasila, it's actually deeper than that. Because of my love to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I love nobody else. I cleanse my love from anybody else except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this, by the way, the credit goes to my father. That's how he taught us from the beginning. And he always says it in his lectures. Because you cleanse your heart and your mind from anyone except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then everything is attached to Allah. Then you see, okay, who Allah orders me to love, who Allah orders me to follow, I will only strictly follow that. You come back to Imam Hussein. Then he becomes your anchor. When you have that emotional anchor, I've seen a lot of people, wallah, and we went through it. Like, it's not, I'm not talking about, stories we heard. No, we lived in this community. Some of it happened to us, some of it happened to people very close to us. Very close to us. That, in early youth and all of these things, you might leave a bit.
You might go astray, and that is part of being human.
You might stop praying. You might actually leave a whole religion and say, look, I'm secular now, I don't know, or I'm agnostic, or whatever the terminology these days are. Imam Hussein brings you back. I've seen youth in our community. Some of them are not youth anymore. And some of them youth continuously till now. Wallah, they drink. But during Ashura,
they abstain.
They abstain. And then later, they will come back. Why? Because the anchor is still there. Yes, they extend it a bit too much. But alhamdulillah, it pulls them back. That anchor in your life is part of your well-being. We need that. Even if we talk not religion, we talk about generally, you need an anchor point in your life. Because that will bring you back. And that's the cleansing, that's the healing. And I'd like you to now comment.
I remember in one of the centers that had a weekly program, I used to see this kid who used to come every single week. Never went inside the majlis. Never. I'd always see him outside playing with a ball, playing with a scooter, playing with something, but I've never seen him inside. And I've never seen him with anybody else. Just alone, playing with other friends. Never seen anybody drop him off. Never seen anyone pick him up. And this went on for probably weeks to months, But in the back of my mind, I wasn't sure, how do I... it wasn't even a thing that I wanted to ask. But then one day I was quite intrigued to know. I mean, this guy comes, but he's always outside, never comes in, never comes with his dad. What is he? So I went up to him and said, look, who's your dad? Can you show me? I was like, maybe I don't know him. Maybe I haven't seen him. Maybe he's somebody's son that I actually know. And he said, oh, actually, my dad doesn't come. And I said, so he said, he drops me off, me and my mum. He drops me and my mum off, and he works as a taxi driver at night. He's never come to the majlis, and you probably wouldn't even know his face if he came. And that was quite surprising to me. Now, that so-called child, who was a child back then, is now one of a very successful youth in the community, and his father remains out of the picture. And when you said being the anchor point, coming to the majalis pull you in, this kid, I don't think has ever sat down inside majlis and heard anything actively. I'm sure he would have background hearing, and the fact is he saw the majlis as a point of playing and some sort of time.
It's like passive smoking.
Exactly.
With all respect,
exactly.
Like just for a joke.
He was just there, taking
just there,
advantage of the environment.
It does work.
Playing. But now, just the fact that he was turning up and doing those things, actually had a positive impact on him, and now he's a much more bigger, just being exposed to the majlis. That's the point.
I remember there was a family in our community. Their kids were very, very active, like naughty active, not just active. And they used to come to the mosque. And I remember the people used to be really making sure they communicate to their parents their displeasure with their behavior. So one day the parents came and the kids weren't there. So my father called their father and said, where are your kids? He goes, oh, look, Sheikh, now, everybody, gets bothered and this stuff, so I didn't bring them. He goes, go, bring them, and you don't come back. You and your wife don't come back. This mosque is not built for you. It's built for them.
Yeah.
And whoever says they are naughty, let them talk to me. Tell them they are Sheikh's sons. It's very important we have that kind of thinking. Because our centers and our mosque, we again go back and with all due respect,
look, they're part of our school, like we're learning from them.
Managers, and I think this is a very good because we talk about the community.
Yeah.
And part of the community is the people who are, holding these places together. Who, by the way, we call them center management, but it's not management. We have to be very careful. They have an amana, and they are actually serving that amana. We have to be very, very careful that when I have a place I'm running, or Allah has given me the honor of holding the keys to somewhere, you are actually serving the community and serving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through that place. So be very careful to not make it your personal thing. It's Allah's thing, it's not your personal thing. That's why we say al-masajidu biyut Allah. It is a house of Allah where you're just the guardian who has been chosen to run the place. So always you have to see, and when I take that personal me out, then I have to look at what's best. And I think one of the things we really want to do is how can we make our centers more accessible to more kids, because that's how they start growing. You want them to be there. Okay, they might break half of the glasses and they might not. And
I don't blame them, because they don't understand what is being said on the minbar half the time, because the language
we're
used.
We're going back to the.
Yeah.
That's why it's
an intertwined topic.
It's a complete circle.
So we really need something specific and dedicated to kids. I think my wife told me once that one of the centers she visited has a dedicated children's room, where during the time when the main majlis is happening, there is a person dedicated at running kids appropriate or age appropriate activities in that room for the duration of the event.
I agree, and at the same time
disagree.
And not disagree, but I like a tweak to it.
Sure.
Okay, the main lecture maybe, But we want to expose them to the majalis.
Sure.
You want to make sure they are, especially the age group. It depends. Like, for example, I tell you a personal example. I have my youngest is very active. Not naughty, but active.
He hasn't reached that level yet.
Very smart active. He's 5 now. When we used to take him, before he thinks, he starts crying. He doesn't want to sit in the majlis and the stuff. Now, when last year, I think, this Muharram, Mullah Nazar came. All respect to him.
Yeah.
A very dear friend and a very good reciter and very good mu'min as well. So Mullah Nazar Qatari came. And when Mullah Nazar Qatari came, as soon as he heard Mullah Nazar is coming, he goes, let's go. Okay. So now we dedicated to go to Mullah Nazar's. We used to go from the English lecture. He would sit down. The English lecture finishes. The Arabic lecture finishes with the promise that he's going to see Mullah Nazar. Because he actually, likes his recitation.
He has lots of work that he's done with kids and lots of recitations.
And all of that because I promised him after Mullah Nazar finishes, I'll make sure you say hi to him and you recite that thing for him. That's very important exposure. When the kid wants to sit in the main program,
they can.
Do not take them to that. Yeah. So have that exposure element. Or, for example, when they're reciting Musibah, bring them in. Or at least have a TV screen for them. Or have some sort of, glass where you open it. Let the exposure happen. Don't only make them busy with those activities.
Of course.
By all means have the activities. But in Latom, make sure they are in the middle. In Latom, there's no have a screen. No. Have them in the Latom. Because that's what helps us. And that's what builds the next generation. Everything we have, if we have anything today, is because of our Latom. This is something we will not, under any circumstances, ever negotiate on. A lot of people, they want to be modern. They want to be 21st century. When it comes to Latom, I'm very progressive, but not to Latom. When it comes to Latom, no, we want to keep it. Yes, by all means, we need to communicate with others, but we also need to make sure what builds character within ourselves. That is more strong. By the way, Latom doesn't really benefit the Imam. What benefit does it have? Or makes up? But it is part of our sha'a'ir that keeps us alive. And if we have any sort of, strength, if we have any brave, lessons that we have proven over the years as Shia of Imam Ali alayhi salam, our Latom is part of it. Not just because of Latom as an activity, but because Imam Hussein alayhi salam is within it. Anything we have from
back to our anchor point.
Yes.
And how do you...
That
is the point, yeah. And so how do you see that as being the contributor to the well-being of an individual?
So I would like to go to a macro level and come back to this one. There's a hadith that the Prophet ﷺ says that's very, very famous. كلكم راع وكلكم مسؤول عن رعيته. Every one of you is a shepherd and every one of you is responsible for those who he nurtures. What does the Prophet, we started about Safina just a second ago. Does the Prophet ﷺ mean something deeper? Why does he use the analogy of
a shepherd?
Of the shepherd, right? Come back to modern psychology and modern mental health and all of these things. If you see a lot of, and this is even some, I don't want to take too much time with the references and all of these things. Some of the very, very advanced psychologists and professors in this field have actually talked about it. The best way for a parent to be is like a shepherd. There's no better example. Why? Shepherd does 2 duties. One, makes sure that the sheep are protected from any
external
threat. Protection. That's the first. That's why a shepherd usually has dogs, keeps the sheep in safe places, maybe stays awake during the night or puts a fence around them so that no wolves come and eat them. It's very involved the process of physical protection, but not just physical protection from
the weather,
and large noise that actually makes them scared and go up to the valley and fall into the off the cliff. So making sure that any hazard that comes externally, they protect them from. That's one. The second thing, nurturing them. But he doesn't just nurture them by just giving them food, because you don't have good sheep now. You see, actually, and if someone doesn't, please do go and see how shepherds work. Until today, we're talking about 21st century. We're not talking about only old methods. You have to take the sheep out. I lived in Orange during my uni years. And Orange is in Central West, New South Wales.
Nice part of New South Wales.
It's very nice.
It used to be the middle of nowhere.
It used to be. But
now it's the middle of somewhere.
And, I used to see that and I was going, wow, okay. You have literally endless number of sheep and cow or whatever that's being taken by these shepherds or cowboys or whatever you call them in the middle of fields. Like you're talking about, sometimes they walk for hundreds of kilometers, to go and take them to this yard, and then you can take them to that valley and take them to this thing. Why? Because the grass is different, because the weather is different, because you expose them to the right environment that gives them the nutrients that you want them to get, and also you move their muscles so that they have the best meat so that you can sell it. Nurturing and protection. It's never engineering. It starts from there. If our parents or our parenting duties is to nurture and protect our kids, then isn't an environment better for us than Majalis of Muhammad Hussein alayhi salam? When you're actually now exposing them to a lecture, you're exposing them to culture, you're exposing them to the community, you give them the opportunity to make good friends and have influence. Sometimes with my kids, I need the friends. The kid don't ever always listen to their parents. How can I create that? Imam Hussein alayhi salam provides you very good nurture and a protection, because the others are protecting with you. It takes a village to raise a child, because that's the truth.
And it teaches you so many other things too, how to become generous, how to give without expecting something in return, how to become emotionally, have an emotional relationship with somebody other than humans.
And how to build resilience.
How to build the resilience.
And that's crying. Men don't cry. That's
Exactly.
our community. But then if they come and sit to Imam Hussein, they cry. And actually the loudest you cry, sometimes it's a bit of show off. Show off for Imam Hussein and cry.
Show off, exactly.
But we're not encouraging it, but we're saying it's all right. That's actually an exercise of healing.
Yeah. And that brings you back to, the point of using the Imam Hussein alayhi salam as your anchor, revolving your parenting skills to nurture and putting them in that environment of being exposed to Imam Hussein, picking your friends from the majalis, that is big.
And protecting them from going to other areas
exactly
that might expose them to other things.
The biggest issues we have now in our youth is parents saying, I have no control over my kids. But you did when they were growing up. When they were age 4, 5, 6, you had control, but you have no control over them now that they're 15 or 16.
Because they only think about it when they are 16 and 15, and when now we have Rahmatullah alayh, he passed away this year. Rahmatullah alayh, Sayyid Ali al-Khurasani, Sayyid Ali al-Khurasani, Allah yarhamah. Sayyid Father Milani passed away.
Sayyid Father Milani.
Huge respect to them both. If I have anything, Isaac Newton says it. If I have anything, because I was standing on the shoulders of giants. Exactly like you, said William Abu Bashir and this stuff. If we have anything, it's because we stood on shoulders of giants. It's the people we exposed to in our life, and that's the exposure again. A few years ago, 2016 to be precise, we went to Qom to visit there with some of my friends. So we went to visit Sayyid Ali al-Khurasani, Allah yarhamah, one of our very pious scholars. And he actually, just for context, him and Sayyid Jawad al-Shahristani established Mu'assasat Ahlulbayt Turath, اللي of course then became the big Mu'assasa of Sayyid al-Sistani, Allah يحفظه آية الله العظمى سيد السيستاني حفظه الله. So Sayyid Ali Khurasani, a great friend of my father, and like honestly a man of God. واقعا a man of God. Just sitting in his presence, you feel Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's presence. A man of God. So he told me this story. He was giving it to us as a life lesson. Because once, I'm not going to mention the khatib that he mentioned because I don't want any ghiba. So he mentioned the Huj Khatib, one of the very respected, and he became a shaheed, rahmatullahi alayh. Once his son did some dealing with the government or something like that of the day, which were tyrant. So people in Najaf started criticizing him. If you brought up your son properly, he wouldn't have done that.
Of course.
So he went on top of the member some of these nights in the majlis, and he got very emotional, and he said it this way. He goes, yes, he is my son, but he's also your son. He is my son, but he's the son of Husseiniya. He is my son, but he's the son of TV. He is my son, but he's the son of radio. He is my son, but he's the son of the school. He is my son and his son, and he said everything. My son is a collection of many influences. I'm but one. He came back to that and he said, going back to that, your son is being influenced by so many different players. Some of them you're aware of, some of them you're not aware of. Especially in our age, they could be playing Xbox and talking to strangers that you have no idea who they are. Watching YouTube that you have no idea what they're watching. So the exposures in life are beyond your control. But how can I make sure I expose them early enough so they have the internal filters? I don't need to watch them all the time. And by the way, that's not easy. By all means not easy. So the difference between sheep and humans is that sheep, whatever the shepherd will tell them 1,000,000 times, that if you go that path, there is a cliff, you're going to fall, they're still going to go. So he has to come and bring a dog that actually keeps them away. But our sons have brains. By the way, sons and daughters.
And daughters,
and
our children.
Offspring in general. But because the Sayyid, had a son, so that's why I was talking about the son. How can I create those filters in their brain so that they actually know right from wrong? So they have their own compass. That only happens if I make sure everybody helps me. The mosque helps me, the center helps me, the Masjid Husseini. Exposure again. Exposure.
As a continuation to this, one of the centers I went to in Sydney, when I was reciting there, after the recitation, we sat down as a group of youth to talk about a few things. And one of the things that I asked them was there any other centers that you go to? And almost 100% of them said no. They went to the same place from when they were very young. In fact, some of them from when they were children. They just went to the same place over and over again. Just like the example you used with the shepherd and the shepherd taking the sheep to different locations. I think we also need to be very mindful that variety is important. We need to expose our children to different centers, not just the one individual center that is close to my house and I go to that center all the time. We need to be able to expose them to the one that's far ahead. One of the centers we used to go to when we first came to Australia, I think it was 45 minutes drive away. And every Thursday, it was the only center that had a program on a Thursday night.
I should actually praise your dad, because I remember any center I go, I'll see your dad.
You would see my dad. And, we grew up together in the centers. And my dad used to be like, pick us up. And he says, and even during my, high school years and HSC, even during the times when I was about to sit the HSC, he'd be like, there's a majlis, you're coming. It wasn't like, there's a majlis, would you like to come? It's very different. You're coming. And I said, no problem. I used to work my schedule around the majalis, not the other way around.
My father actually, in every Ashura, since we were young, he used to encourage us, and until now I do it. And mashallah, the majalis are now too many, so it's very difficult to. He was encouraging us every year to make sure we visit every single majlis. We're talking about public majlis.
In Muharram.
During the 10 nights. The rest of the year, whatever you want to do, it's up to you. But those 10 days, Urdu, Farsi, whatever speak, or whatever spoken language, whatever, go. And I do that with my kids now. I take them also to these things. To the extent when you ask my sons, how do the Urdu speakers do it? And they'll tell you, oh, but there are Urdu speakers who are Punjabi, and there's the ones, so they know all of those differences, despite the fact they don't speak even a word of that language. So it's a very important thing, exposure to variety, but also you create that identity within the child that we're actually many. And being a Shia, because sometimes, and I'm going to be so politically out there, but we have to be very, very blunt about these things, because when we're talking about parenting, you have to be very exact about it. Go back to well-being. We have two pressures that our youth face. And if we don't identify, we can't talk about the solutions. One is the conflict of identities. You know, I come up and I live in a quite conservative, compared to the mainstream, conservative culture, a conservative household that has a lot of limitations, that I need to be aware of my thinking, I'm aware of how I dress and how I act and all of these things. Versus going to the university or going to school where it's freedom and sometimes, conflict of ideology, not just conflict of dress and freedom and of expression and all of these things. That's one, and that everybody faces that, let's say, of a Muslim background. What makes it worse is that not I am different only, but the others might look at me with question marks. Either Islamophobia, that they have fear, and sometimes that can be very real, or they feel threatened by me, which makes it even worse because they might interact with me in a more violent way. Now that violence could be psychological, could be actual physical. So then I have that second layer of complexity. Then I have a third layer of complexity that even within the Muslim community, I'm a Shia. And then sometimes the mainstream Muslims, what is Shia? So unfortunately, sometimes there's misunderstanding. Sometimes depends on the political spectrum. Sometimes even, the othering might happen. So it's a very complex scenario as a youth. Then that's one dimension. The second dimension we mentioned is actually I am going through the same puberty that everybody else is going through. So I have the hormonal imbalances that's happening. I have the growth and the developmental milestones that I'm achieving or not achieving and what's playing in my head. So I have those challenges that with like everybody else, but also have that conflicting thing. And that's every single, and please, I can't emphasize this, every single one of our community goes through this. How much resilience they have, how much strength they have, how much exposure they have, how much they deal with it is a different matter. Everybody going to go through it differently. Everybody has their own journey, but everybody's going to go through this. How can I make sure that I prepare my son or daughter to those challenges ahead? It doesn't start when they're 15 and they're already into deep end. That's what people do. It starts when they're kids. And that's why we said Imam Hussein is a very good anchor point. Salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. Because you need somebody else that they can I don't know how to say it in a very kind of slang way, but you need to empty out your inner kind of pain and your feelings and emotions. And who's better than Imam Hussein alayhi salam? That's anchor point that we talked about. But also that exposure early on gives them a support network. Gives them friends who go through exactly the same challenges, who can actually understand how to support them. Who am I to be able to... I lived in a different generation. Imam Ali alayhi salam mentions this. He goes, bring up your kids in a different manner than how you were brought up. Because they were created for a time that's not yours,
Exactly.
different to you. So yes, I can be their friend, I can support them, but they need their peer support. That peer support, do I find it at school? Do I find it at uni? Or do I find it in an environment that I know that your son is going there, and Sayyid's son is going there, and I want that environment. Because they're going through, they have a peer support. That's what I need. That's the second layer. The third layer, which is more important than all of that, is learning resilience. Learning resilience. You know, we talk about Sayyida Zainab salamullah alayha. And in a lot of concepts, when we talk about Sayyida Zainab alayhi salam, a lot of it tear-provoking. It's more than that. I always say to youth, you know, every single thing in Ashura has relevance to us today. Every single thing. You can learn something from it. Zainab salamullah alayha, the resilience. How can I stand up? How can the life can throw everything at me? And then she goes, oh, I did not see except beauty. What beauty did you see? Yes, the beauty of sabr, the beauty of patience, the beauty of sacrifice, the beauty. Okay. And then how can you make sure that your intention is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that whatever comes your way, let it come. But that's built through exposure to scholars, exposure to the masajid, exposure to the community. That's why I emphasize that again.
You know, in last year, the College of General Practitioners did a study, and they looked at the percentage of people coming to GPs and what their main complaint was. More than 50% of it was for mental health reasons and well-being reasons. And that was the point of discussion about trying to get mental health services a bit more funding in the government. But one of the things that we find that is quite useful as a first point of contact for a lot of these patients as a clinician is to recommend talking to somebody. You know, so mainstream psychology now approaches the management of well-being as a human being from a holistic point of view, and we call it the bio, psycho, socio, emotional, spiritual way of approaching somebody's well-being. So the bio is how do you medically and biologically treat somebody and intervene. Psycho is how do you psychologically, using psychotherapy and the appropriate techniques and coping mechanisms and resilience, how do you build that?
Cognitive therapy.
Cognitive therapy. Social is what kind of a social being are you? Are you out there? Are you introverted, extroverted? Do you have exposure to protective mechanisms that help you get through difficult situations? Community support.
What's your circle of support?
Exactly, you know, and quite a lot of the problems that we see in the community is a lack of one or more of these situations: biopsychosocial, emotional, and spiritual. Like, what do you have a belief system? Do you go to church on Sundays? Do you go to mosque every Friday or Thursday?
Which connects it to the all
exactly
about,
everything else that we've been talking about.
In the same light, actually, a lot of cancer survivor research shows, and this is amazing, and because we're quoting these studies because they published peer-reviewed, again, because the peer review is important, right? And there's a lot of cancer survivor research that actually shows that people who have a spiritual connections and spiritual spirituality as part of their all those dimensions that you mentioned, had better chances of surviving cancer.
Yeah,
this is very, very interesting. So it actually impacts, of course, not as by itself as a singular, because it's not a cause effect, but we're talking about compounding effect. It's actually assists your own well-being, even physically, not just emotionally. So it's very, very interesting when the spiritual, and obviously, with the huge disclaimer in the medical text, they put that the spirituality could be anything. It doesn't have to be.
And they mention mindfulness and self-reflection and day-to-day mantra and things like that.
But coming back, because our topic is about spirituality in the context of our faith, it's very important, that exposure. But I also want to add to that point that Ahlulbayt and Imam Hussein alayhi salam specifically actually give us, because one of the things we do, and this is very, very well evidenced, especially, for example, in the addiction, for example, the AA therapy and all of these things, is that peer support, when you have the support network and people talking about their own experiences and then you sharing your experiences and all of these things, that actually elevates your spirit and makes you much more determined to change. And actually, if you abstain from, the drug or whatever it is, it actually helps. And we have a lot of, evidence for that. Very interestingly, that the story of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, his sacrifice, the family has gone. That's a very good way of bringing that support network in. When you're talking about what others have been exposed, especially someone you love, and then everybody in the community in a safe environment, because safety is very important. In a safe environment, then you can talk about those things. And then people talk about it. Oh, and I was going through this. Now, what they talk about, and this is a personal reflection that I've observed in our community, what people talk about, for example, they're trying to talk about how Imam Hussein or al-Banin or Abu Fadl Abbas helped them, but what they're talking about also the problem they went through.
Yeah.
Now, that's healing. That's group therapy. Because they're talking about, but I was, for example, I had cancer and then I went through this and it was very difficult. And I went to al-Bani and then I did this and then I had to go to see the doctor. Then, and then their healing process. And then the second person, oh, wow, because my cousin went through this again. That is the group therapy we're talking about. Yes, Imam Hussein is the anchor. Yeah. It's the reason that discussion is happening, but that safe environment was created for them to heal together because of his remembrance and his exposure. I don't know if my point makes sense, but it's a very important
100%. I think we've explored some really, really important topics. I think most important of which is how to tackle some of the issues that our youth face at the moment, especially with the challenges of the environment that they live in, and the expectations from everybody around them about the level that they should be at, the amount of money they should be making, what kind of relationships they should be in, what kind of achievements they should be achieving. So there's quite a lot of pressure. And I think the anchor point of attending the majalis and having that appropriate support system and the correct environment.
We want minimum attending.
Participation. Actively participate. Find a role in whichever way you can in the majalis and in the environment of Ahlulbayt and the majalis of Ahlulbayt alayhim salam. Are there any other points you want to explore?
No, I think we had such a long discussion today. I just want to emphasize one thing, and that is, I mentioned it in the middle, but I think we emphasize it at the end, very important. Everything you do, and this is again an advice that was given to me by my father when I was, at the beginning of my journey in life. Because when you study, when you work, when you do anything, even when you're sleeping, even when you're watching TV, whatever you do that with the intention of getting closer to Allah. What happens is that no matter then if people recognized it or didn't recognize it, because you did it for Allah, you didn't do it for people. People paid you or didn't pay you, who cares? You went through so much hardship to learn that exam, for example, or to prepare for that exam, or to memorize whatever you needed to memorize, or you didn't. Because why? Everything is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala counts everything. There's nothing. So people didn't appreciate it, who cares? People didn't pay you for it, who cares? People underpaid you for it, who cares? Because at the end of the day, you did it for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I think it starts from there. And then when we talk about the anchor, then that makes even more sense.
I can't add anything else to that. I think it's been a beautiful journey. We've discussed some really pertinent points. And I think with the intention of this was to make sure we add to the toolbox of everybody else so that they can at least
add to our own tool, to remind ourselves
exactly
of our
to add some more for our well-being.
And
we appreciate your presence. We appreciate the opportunity, and we're thankful to Alwasi TV for having us today, and hopefully to many, many more of these in the future. Any final points to add?
No, I thank Alwasi TV, of course, for this opportunity to discuss such a point. But also, I think they're very smart. They put me in front of you. So kind of, we can encourage each other to talk.
100%.
But inshallah, subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us the opportunity to serve Imam Hussein
Ahlulbayt and Imam Hussein
and through service of Ahlulbayt to serve our community.
Inshallah. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين. اللهم صل على